Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thanks, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on digital trade opportunities for Latin America. We are really thrilled to have you all here representing various sectors, organizations, and regions of the world as we delve into an important topic with immense potential for the Latin American region. My name is Nicholas Schubert, and I'm part of the Trade Policy Exchange, or TPE, the platform hosting this event today. Since its launch in April 2019, TPA has served as a dynamic hub, fostering dialogue and knowledge sharing among trade professionals. Our mission is to promote an open debate on trade policy by bringing together international institutions, governments, civil society, business, and academia. And at the TPE, at the Trade Policy Exchange, we firmly believe in amplifying diverse voices and showcasing fresh ideas. We are committed to fostering diversity and gender equality, ensuring that all perspectives are heard on trade policy issues. Moreover, we provide networking opportunities to facilitate the exchange of information and offer a platform for our expert members to showcase their invaluable work. Today's webinar aims to explore the economic possibilities of the digitalization process in Latin America. Many nations within our region have already recognized the potential and have made significant progress in promoting open digital markets. The Pacific Alliance, for instance, has established high standard telecommunications and e-commerce standards and is actively working towards a regional digital market. Mercosur, on its hand, has prioritized its digital agenda, focusing on leveraging digital technologies for the benefit of small and medium-sized enterprises. And individual Mercosur members have committed to digital trade enabling disciplines. Also, the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean has been leading a regional digital trade agenda. While the Latin American region possesses a robust interoperable policy infrastructure, including free trade agreements and compatible digital agendas, it is important to address the current challenges. The global scenario, including the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, has led to high commodity prices, supply chain disruptions, insecurity, inflation, financial vulnerability, and political uncertainty. In this context, promoting growth in our region becomes imperative, and leveraging digital trade and further integration can be instrumental in overcoming these global challenges that we are also facing in this region, and driving inclusive development. Today's webinar serves as a platform to explore these opportunities, share insights, and collectively brainstorm ways to promote inclusive digital trade in Latin America. Together, let's embark on this journey towards a future of growth, prosperity, and digital transformation. The TPE will be hosting a series of webinars on digital trade in the African Continental Free Trade Area, digital trade and taxation, and digital trade and privacy in the coming months. Stay updated by visiting our Trade Policy Exchange webpage and following our Twitter account for more information and participation details. I will now pass the floor to our moderator, Mr. Alejandro Patiño, who is an information and communications technologies sector specialist and researcher at the Unit of Innovation and New Technologies at ECLAC. Thank you for your presence today, and we look forward to engaging in a productive discussion ahead. Thanks a lot. Alejandro.
Thank you, Nicholas, for the presentation. Good morning and good afternoon to everyone for connecting to this panel on opportunities for digital trade in Latin America. I'm sure we're going to have a great conversation today. Special thanks also to our panelists for joining, for giving us their time to share their thoughts and experiences regarding the digital trade in the region. As you all may know, traditional trade between Latin American countries has been limited for various reasons. Geographic distance, high transportation cost, different tariff regimes. However, digital economy is breaking down some of these barriers. For example, digital products can easily be distributed online, and also cultural similarities between our countries could make digital products especially attractive for intra-regional trade. We also have made important progress in the adoption of digital technologies in Latin America in the past years. For example, some data indicates that the number of internet users in Latin America is expected to reach around 500 million in the next few years. The penetration of smartphones is around 70% also. And some numbers also indicate that the e-commerce market in the region is about to reach 1 trillion by 2025. However, there is still obviously some important challenges that need to be addressed in order to foster digital trade in the region. The need for harmonized regulations and standards, the need to improve connectivity and broadband access, the need also to have some policy initiatives to foster our digital economy. Hopefully, during this panel, we're going to be able to address some of these challenges. Once again, thank you for connecting. Before we begin, I'm going to briefly introduce our panelists today, and a quick note. We're going to have some space for Q&A at the end of the panel using the tool of Zoom. So for those who want to make some questions, please use the tool for Q&A in the platform. First, I would like to welcome Natalia Porras. Natalia, welcome. Natalia obtained a degree in law at the University of Costa Rica and also a master in political economy at the London School of Economics. She has worked in the Ministry of Foreign Trade of Costa Rica since 2008 and is currently coordinator of the Trade in Service and Digital Economy area. In this capacity, she's in charge of Costa Rica's negotiations regarding digital economy, the Digital Economy Partnership Agreement, DEPA, and he has also actively participated in Costa Rican access to the OECD. Welcome, Natalia. Also, would like to welcome Karina Tejada. Karina is a lawyer, international trade specialist with a focus on service trade and e-commerce. She currently serves as a coordinator of service trade and e-commerce negotiations at Peru Ministry of Foreign Trade and Tourism, MINCETUR. She studied international relations at the Catholic University of Peru, and she's pursuing a master's in international economic law at the same university. Welcome, Kevin. Finally, I would like to welcome Nano Mulder, a colleague of mine, and Nano is the head of the Sustainable Trade Unit at ECLAC. His main research and technical assistant areas currently include global value chains in general, and global services in particular, cross-border e-commerce, and sustainable trade with a focus on internationalization of SMEs, gender gaps, and climate change. Previous to ECLAC, Nano worked at the OECD and the Center for Prospective Studies and International Information, CEPI. Nano holds a PhD in economics from the University of Groningen from Netherlands. Well, welcome, Nano. Without further ado, we'll start the panel with some questions. I would like to begin with Nano and ask Nano, we all know that Latin America faces obviously important structural challenges regarding productivity and economic growth. We also have some more other challenges that has to do with inflation and financial vulnerability. From your perspective and your experience, how can digitalization process can increase greater growth in the region, and what specific measures should be taken to enhance the participation of especially small businesses in digital trade and harness their potential for economic development? Please, Nano, go ahead.
Thank you, Alejandro and Nicolas. Thanks for this invitation, and I would like to congratulate Trade Policy Exchange for organizing this very interesting series of webinars, which are, I think, particularly important in the context of Africa and Latin America, who are lagging behind in digital trade. I would just like to remind some statistics on where Latin America stands with regard to the participation in digital trade globally. First of all, the region lags behind in the measurement of digital trade. That's a particular challenge. I mean, it's a challenge for all countries in the world, but I think that we are lagging behind in particular compared to the OECD economies. So certain estimates we have, which are tentative, may sub-estimate somewhat how the region is participating. So when we talk about trade in modern services or IT-enabled services, Latin America only represents 1.8% of global exports, and this percentage has been declining over the past decade. Also, when we talk about cross-border e-commerce, very preliminary estimates indicate a similar participation, around 2% in cross-border e-commerce flows, and mostly oriented towards goods. Now, also, the topic of today is important with regard to regional integration, because as Nicolas has mentioned, and Alejandro as well, we have a huge potential for trade in digital services in the region because of similarities in language and culture, amongst other characteristics that make the region unique for digital trade in services. However, also preliminary data show that only between 10 and 50% of the region's exports are directed towards the same region. So in short, we have a huge potential to increase digital trade, exports to the world and to the region in particular. Now, what are some of the challenges the region is facing to increase the participation in digital trade? Well, I think I would like to mention a few. One is an issue that is already mentioned, improved access to digital technology. Now, we have advanced a lot in terms of access to the internet and through mobile devices. However, when we look at broadband internet and fixed connections, there's still a huge gap to be bridged, not only between cities and the rural regions, but also there are very important gaps with regard to access to these technologies by gender and also income groups. We see that the poor of the lower income deciles, they still face challenges to participate in the internet economy. And not only the issue is of access, but also in terms of the abilities to participate effectively in digital trade. And this brings me to the other issue of productivity. We see that in particular, small and medium-sized enterprises, they have a very low level of productivity and efficiency and are very slow in taking up digital technologies for their internationalization and participation in digital trade. Now, in the face of these circumstances, there are fortunately increasing number of initiatives ongoing, and we will come back to that later, in terms of trade agreements and collaboration initiatives, which I will mention in the second round of interventions. But I would like to mention now a few broad types of support measures that are really needed to step up the participation, in particular of small and medium-sized enterprises in digital trade. So one definitely is the issue of improving access. And here, the issue is not only about getting a broadband connection for small and medium-sized enterprises in the rural areas, but it is the main challenge is digital transformation. So what we really need is that SMEs and firms in general understand the importance of transforming their whole business model to make sure that they don't only have like a web page, but they also transform the way they manage inventories, they conduct marketing efforts and other parts of the business process, that this all needs to be done with digital technologies, which need to be interconnected, and also the personnel needs to be prepared to take benefits to exploit this opportunity. Second, for this, it's very important there's training and support. So we know that many ministries of the economy, as SME promotion agencies, chambers of commerce are working in this area, but still we see that the number of SMEs that are participating in these efforts is still very small. And here in particular, I would like to call upon the importance of the trade promotion agencies, and ECLAC is through the Core PYME project is collaborating actively with the Red Ibero, led by Procomer, also from Costa Rica, to make sure that the support programs that are currently being offered can hopefully in the future reach a larger number of SMEs and have a larger impact in terms of how much they can contribute to digital trade. Now, also, I think it's very important to encourage collaboration among SMEs to lower the cost for to solve the issue of digital transformation. And here the role of producer associations and other types of collaboration is extremely important. And finally, I would like to mention the issue of digital entrepreneurship. We've known that several countries have really invested in improving their startup programs and to emphasize the role of digital SMEs and in particular the global vision or an international vision of the SMEs. So often nowadays it happens that SMEs, they don't start out with a focus on the local market, but immediately on a regional or even global market. So I think this is a very promising tendency. But again, this provides also a preparation of the SMEs to make sure that they can be successful not only in their domestic market, but also internationally. So through these measures, I think that SMEs in particular, they will be much better equipped to participate in digital trade in Latin America. And hopefully we can see in the near future also through distinctive collaboration mechanisms that we will later on mention, that we can really increase the share of the region as an export market, and by boosting the trade within Latin America as a platform also to participate more actively in the international markets, so we can increase that very low participation of just 2% in global export in the coming years.
Thank you, Nano, for giving us this important context for the discussion. I would like to move to the next question for Natalia, Karina, and also for Nano, and try to analyze, considering the existing fragmentation of commercial trade agreements and this very complex political landscape that we have in the region. How can regional cooperation be fostered to address the digital trade gaps in Latin America? And what strategies or initiatives can be implemented to promote inclusive and forward-looking trade discussions? Please, Natalia, if you'd like to answer the question.
Yes, thank you. And first of all, I would like to appreciate Trade Policy Exchange for thinking and making about and making Costa Rica part of this conversation. Costa Rica is a small and open economy, but we have benefited broadly from economic integration in order to share our goods and services with the rest of the world. So just to give you an example, in the 1980s, we exported only 4 products, and we currently export more than 4,000 products to 150 countries. And in the same line, we can proudly say that 43% of our exports are services, and out of that 43%, 61% is what we call modern services, or services enabled by information and communication technologies. So this kind of tells you that well, they're doing well, but that's not the only phase that we should see. We face a lot of challenges, and I think in the same line as many Latin American countries with regards to digital trade. And we still have some shortfalls in addressing the digital divide and having a regulatory framework that is not yet fully suited for purpose. So in this context, I think that regional cooperation is extremely useful for a range of reasons. And this is how I come to answer your question, Alejandro. I think it is an opportunity to ensure access to trade to many that have not been able to be part of the global economy. So the mere fact that regional cooperation makes us think about these things, makes us think about our regulatory framework, contributes to each and every country's legal framework, and of thinking how can we modernize that legal framework. Also, we must recognize that many of the challenges of the digital transformation are global, and we don't still have an answer, or we have only partial answers to these challenges. So I think that there's a role for regional cooperation to play in thinking and rethinking these challenges. Also, some countries have had similar trade policies. They have accepted similar standards, and I think that there is a very important role to play in cooperation on discussing how they have implemented these standards in trade agreements and in digital economy agreements, how they have implemented, what challenges they have faced. Do they really, have they been able to really implement these standards in their own economic and social context? And also many countries are currently involved in multilateral and plurilateral discussions at the WTO on e-commerce related issues. And I think that regional cooperation must connect the dots with these discussions to learn from each other's experiences and practices. So to get to your final question on how cooperation can be fostered, I think that more discussions should be promoted regarding the implementation of international standards. So do we only have them in paper, or are we being really able to implement them at home, and how the different institutions within an economy can implement these international standards? So that's, I think, a conversation that could be fostered by regional cooperation. Also, I think that there's a role in promoting greater communication between specialized agencies. So there's a current trend in trying to promote, for example, communication between consumer protection agencies. So, and because the challenges and the problems are cross-border, it is important to promote this kind of very specialized dialogue. And I also think that within the context of regional cooperation, it is important what countries do within the country to coordinate the different agencies to have a more integral and public policy approach to regional cooperation, because it's not just talking about consumer protection or data protection in different forums where different agencies go, but it's about thinking how is this part of the enabling environment of the digital economy, and how public policy should be integral, and also public policy, in order to share these experiences and to cooperate with the region, should be also integral. And finally, I think it's really important to have a deep understanding of trade flows, trade barriers, and what do digital businesses need to thrive. And of course, here, there is a great challenge in measuring the digital economy with very good efforts in place already and very good tools. But I think the region should be trying to know what we're talking about, and to have more details on what businesses need, what businesses are facing. For example, I recently read a paper by the OECD, which had focused on asking businesses what problems they had faced in implementing data protection, businesses that deal with data flows, what kind of hurdles they faced when implementing data protection regulations. And I think this is a very helpful insight, because the regulations are there, they have to be complied, but what does that really mean for businesses? And I think this will take me to the next question you asked us, and we can talk more about this, but I think about the role of business and what information we can get from them and work with them. Just as Nano said, we need to work with export promotion agencies, and export promotion agencies, information comes from businesses. What they do comes from businesses. So I think there's an important role and an important strategy to develop in regional cooperation with regards to communication with businesses. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalia, for that very interesting, insightful thoughts. And I would like to move to Karina with the same question. Karina, regarding your experience, what could be or is the role of cooperation or regional cooperation, especially in order to try to improve digital trade? What type of instruments could be used, standards, regulations, and so forth? Please, Karina.
Sorry, are you able to hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay, thank you. We may think of a multilateral agreement such as the one being negotiated between the framework of the World Trade Organization, or a plurilateral agreement such as the CPTPP, for example, which comprises a significant number of countries that have committed to comply with framework provisions to facilitate electronic commerce already. The provisions contained so far in trade agreements on digital matters aim to facilitate e-commerce, but it is still necessary to ensure standards for the best functioning of e-commerce. In example, for the digital trade experience to be positive, and it is also necessary to ensure that these standards are compatible between countries. However, when we hear about the standards in e-commerce, we could be talking about patterns that suppliers of goods or services by electronic means are expected to consider in order to offer a pleasant or at least an acceptable experience to the user. For example, it is necessary to offer the most reliable and clear information about the product or service offered, or provide the opportunity for returns, offer clear and real photographs when it comes to goods, offer digital security when taking the service, or protect the personal data given to the supplier. From my point of view, those are some of the points or the issues that should be included in the framework of a future multilateral or plurilateral digital agreement. Current FTAs do mention the importance of personal data protection, for example, but do not specify how this personal data has to be protected and what particularities should be taken into account for the flow of data between parties. Another example of something that the new electronic commerce agreements could contain are basic aspects that should be observed by providers when offering goods or services. Focusing in Latin America specifically, we observe that several countries in the region have already assumed basic commitments for the development of electronic commerce and are working on the implementation of digital issues included in their respective digital agenda. In this regard, it seems appropriate to consider the possibility of concluding a regional electronic commerce or digital economy agreement between most of the Latin American countries. Such an agreement should therefore contain binding commitments to facilitate electronic commerce, such as those already contained in agreements such as CPTPP and the Pacific Alliance, for example, which are subject to dispute settlement procedures. Along with these provisions should be increasingly specialized binding commitments on consumer protection, personal data, free access to the internet, provisions that seek to detail basic requirements for a secure internet, access to open government data, coordination between national digital security centers, among others. Many of those provisions will be related to the digital rights of people in the region that are being recognized in countries such as Peru and Chile already. In relation to the participation of the private sector, I would say that we need that the private sector participates actively and share its experience in each of the issues contained in any digital agreement. It is necessary to know not only the standards that the industry could comply with, but also the standards that the consumers expect to be required for a better digital trade experience. On the other hand, the private sector will be main recipient of cooperation and collaboration initiatives in areas such as the generation of digital capabilities in companies that supply digital goods and services, which may arise from the agreements or the agreement concluded in the region. Furthermore, private sector collaboration is key to the measurement of e-commerce, without which it will not be possible to adequately design initiatives that can improve the digital ecosystem in the region. The experience of private sector participation in the Pacific Alliance is good. For example, it's a good example, and it's good, the experience. But I would say it could be improved also. The Pacific Alliance has created a specific working group, and a specific working group that brings together the most important companies, and they are very active on these issues, on these digital issues. Nevertheless, it would also be interesting to analyze the possibility to also create a group of enterprises specialized or directly related to digital issues, since some of them in the region are smaller enterprises, but they have interesting point of views that it is important to know also. That would be all. Thank you, Alejandro.
Thank you, Karina. I would like to move to Nano again and ask Nano, from your experience, what tools do you see that we can have at hand regarding regional cooperation in order to foster forward-looking trade discussions regarding digital trade?
Thank you, Alejandro. And I think that both Karina and Natalia have already responded somewhat to this question, but I would like just to go in a sort of hierarchical order on what would be the most desired levels of cooperation. First of all, and there was also a question about that in the chat, I think we should promote as both governments and regional organizations like ECLAC, IDB, the CAF Development Bank of Latin America, and other organizations that governments participate in plurilateral initiatives globally to foster digital trade. And just to mention two examples, one is the joint initiative on service domestic regulation, which has been signed in 2021 by 67 countries and now already have 70 members. From the region, we have 9 countries participating, so there's still a huge potential to increase the participation of Latin America in this specific agreement. Another one that is, of course, absolutely crucial is the joint initiative for e-commerce, which has currently 88 members and only 12 countries from the region are participating. So here again, we have a large potential to step up the participation of Latin America in this negotiation process. Now, the joint initiative for e-commerce has still not been signed. There are monthly negotiation rounds, but progress has been made very importantly on online consumer protection, paperless trading, open government data, but there's still some issues that need to be solved with regard to cross-border data flows, privacy, source codes, customs duty for electronic transmissions, and amongst some issues that are still pending. So this is a very important initiative, and I think as a general message, we need to say that agreements at the most international, at the widest regional coverage possible is, of course, the first best solution. Now, those are global initiatives. Now, when we move to the regional of the region of Latin America, unfortunately, we don't have one single negotiation process ongoing that would really foster a digital market within Latin America. So one initiative that you are actively coordinating is the ELAC agenda, which is very important. But this initiative does not really include negotiations among countries to create the digital standards needed for trade. But certainly it is a very important piece to promote collaboration among governments in the region. Now, ECLAC has also been collaborating with Aladi, and Aladi is also in the preparation of maybe in the future creating a negotiation agenda on digital issues. But again, its membership covers South America and but very few countries in Central America and the Caribbean. So certainly they do also have a potential, but it needs to be extended with more countries. Now, of course, the third level, going from the international regional, is the level of the sub-regional integration schemes. And here, the good news is that several integration schemes have their a very active agenda in digital trade. The Pacific Alliance, Andean Communities, Mercosur, and also the Central American market. With Aladi, we've done some work last year in analyzing those digital agendas. And the good news is that these agendas are quite comprehensive. But the bad news is that they mostly focus on like soft issues. So they basically promote collaboration among countries within each sub-regional market. But there are few binding commitments that really promote the convergence of digital regulations. And ECLAC has done very important work with the European University Institute and also with the OECD to map what are the digital regulations in place in different countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. And again, here we have good news and bad news. The good news is that on average, the digital protection is lower than in other developing regions like Africa and Asia. But the bad news is that there is a large heterogeneity among countries in the region and in particular countries within the sub-regional integration scheme. So this is really illustrative that the sub-regional integration schemes are working on digital trade and facilitating digital trade. However, they have not managed yet to bring about a convergence of these digital regulations. Now, finally, I would like to emphasize also the role of collaboration among private sector participants that have already been highlighted. And I think one major initiative to foster e-commerce is the work done by the E-commerce Institute, which is sort of an umbrella organization of all e-commerce associations in the regions that have done excellent work in promoting digital trade within their economies, but still we have sort of an unfulfilled promise that digital trade, in particular for goods, can be promoted. And also the news that I gave at the beginning of the region, that digital trade in services in the region is also still very low. So in short, there's a tremendous potential and an active negotiation agenda going on. But we really lack currently like an initiative like the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement going on in Africa. I mean, hopefully in the future we can, through a stepping stone mechanism, through the regional integration blocks, build a regional agenda and have more binding commitments and more convergence. And again, the participation of the private sector is absolutely crucial, as mentioned before. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nano. I would like to now follow up on some of the topics you just addressed regarding the progress that some trade agreements, sub-regional trade agreements has made. As you mentioned, Pacific Alliance already have a strategy for a regional digital market. Mercosur has also a digital agenda, and also other initiatives are ongoing in Central America. So for Natalia and Karina, what are your thoughts on these progress and these initiatives? How this existing projects, programs, foundations can be leveraged to establish a regional digital market in the region, and what are the key challenges and opportunities of this process? Natalia.
Thank you. Thank you. In the case of Costa Rica, we have not been part yet of Pacific Alliance or Mercosur processes, so I don't quite manage the details. However, let me just make a brief reflection on why these efforts are important. And I think that it all comes from making a trade agreement stay alive. So it's not just in paper, but it does turn into useful, and it's not only about the trade rules, which of course provide legal certainty, but it's about what can we do to really implement this within the region covered by the agreement. So I think, and one of the things that I appreciate very much from the Pacific Alliance, and even I tell my students at the university, is that it is an agreement that is alive, that creates committees, and there is participation from the public and private sector in these committees. So it's not just about the trade rules, but about the possibility to keep discussing things. And I think this has a lot of value for the regional bloc that is part of this agreement.
Thank you, Natalia. And Carita, as you, we all know, Peru is a key player of the Pacific Alliance. You mentioned some of the progress made on the Pacific Alliance in the previous intervention, but what do you think about the challenges, especially regarding the strategy for the regional digital market in the Pacific Alliance with a more critical look?
Thank you. Thank you, Alejandro. If you allow me, I am going to give you a broader idea or my view on all the question. In my view, it is first necessary to identify which specific countries in Latin America could lead the establishment of a digital regional market. In addition, it is also possible to consider also briefly the particular situation of some countries that do not belong to either the Pacific Alliance or the Mercosur, for example, but do have the interest to make commitments on digital trade. Thus, we should consider countries such as Chile, Colombia, Mexico, and Peru that are already part of the Pacific Alliance, and countries as Argentina, Brazil, Uruguay, and Paraguay that also are part of the Mercosur, and Bolivia, Ecuador, that are part of the Andean community, which has been also holding some discussions on digital matters as well. So all these countries already have or the interest in making commitments or have already made commitments on digital trade. Additionally, it is also important to bear in mind that Costa Rica, Ecuador, and Uruguay have applied to become part of the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, the CPTPP, one of the most ambitious agreements in terms of electronic commerce. Similarly, Costa Rica and Ecuador aspire to become members of the Pacific Alliance. And all this allows us to see that the look for the region is very positive for the development of e-commerce. The three blocks mentioned above, at the Pacific Alliance, the Mercosur, the Andean community, have two general issues in common. First, they have or are seeking to agree on binding commitments that lay important foundations for the free development of trade by digital means. And second, they also have digital agendas agreed as a route to promote the development and use of electronic commerce. In the case of the Pacific Alliance and Mercosur, we find a protocol and an electronic commerce agreement, respectively, which contain binding commitments such as those related to the non-imposition of tariffs on electronic transmissions, free transfer of information, free location of servers, online consumer protection, protection of personal data, free access to and use of the internet, reduction of unwanted communication, among others. But those are probably the most important provisions for the private sector. The Andean community is also currently discussing a legal framework that is expected to include commitments related to some of the aforementioned issues, including the non-imposition of customs duties on electronic transmissions, the free transfer of information and server location, and maybe even aspects related to the non-discrimination of digital products and the protection of source codes in trade. On the other hand, the Pacific Alliance, Mercosur, and even the Andean community already have agreed digital agendas to work on issues such as connectivity and infrastructure, development of digital skills, digital government, digital security, regulatory coherence of personal data, among others. In addition, the three blocs agree on the need to take advantage of e-commerce, considering the need to close gaps that are repeated in Latin America countries, as well as the need to adopt measures that seek digital inclusion in the region. All the important coincidences mentioned so far have led some Latin American countries to express similar interests and concerns in forums such as the WTO, where the e-commerce initiative is being negotiated. One of the questions that we have received from participants are about common positions for negotiations, and I think we are not there yet to have common positions, but we have some coincidences in the table of negotiations, of course. Considering this proximity of visions, the establishment of a regional digital market that provides greater facilities for the development of electronic commerce among these countries could only depend on the political will of their government, since the technical coincidences do exist. However, the analysis of the political situation in the region and its effect on e-commerce could be the subject of a separate analysis. For example, it has been possible to observe how political differences have already affected the work of the Pacific Alliance in the recent months. Thus, the political aspect is perhaps the greatest challenge for the development of the digital market in the region. On the other hand, the blocs face similar challenges, such as the lack of progress in measuring e-commerce, the enormous need to include less favored areas in e-commerce, the need to generate consumer confidence in e-commerce, the need to rethink logistical processes for a more efficient e-commerce, confidence in electronic means of payment, the need to improve or innovate postal services, the importance of seeking greater harmony between regulations in the region. Those differences represent costs in terms of money, time, or efficiency also. And the need also to seek a higher level of coordination to ensure interoperability in order to facilitate processes such as the recognition of electronic signature and the sharing of of data throughout the logistics chain, among others. So probably, ideally, most of those challenges should be addressed or could be addressed in the short term between each bloc, and the result of that work will be or could be important for the achievements of the region seeking a kind of Latin America digital single market, let's say, in order to try to really improve the e-commerce in the region itself.
Thank you, Karina. I think we can now move to some questions that our participants are making. I don't know if Nano or Natalia would like to also to answer to the question that is the region able to coordinate common positions and in trade negotiations? I think it's regarding the WTO. I don't know, Nano, Natalia would like to answer that question also.
Yes, thank you. If I may, I don't know if right now, not all Latin American countries are part of the WTO negotiation. Certainly in the runway to the ministerial, I think there is hope that more countries will join. Just a word on that negotiation, I think that it is related to our conversation today, because one question we must ask ourselves is whether a regional agreement would need to follow the WTO agreement or the plurilateral agreement on e-commerce, or should it be in parallel? And I think that there's advantages and disadvantages to both possibilities. On the one hand, I think that the WTO e-commerce agreement will provide a very good basis, and the pillars of what we should be thinking are the common standards. And in that light, I think that as we move towards a conclusion of the process, countries will be coordinating more and more. Now, as to the specific question on whether we are able to coordinate, I think it's complex because, of course, not all countries have the same positions, but also all countries have different regulations. But I don't think that coordination on some issues is impossible. It's just that right now there is not like an Latin American bloc doing that. But certainly, if there are common interests, there are opportunities for collaboration, and I think that this also opens I think this question also made me think about cooperation in all of these digital trade agreements, and the fact that one of the trends in these agreements is to promote cooperation between countries, and this includes, of course, trying to have, as Karina said, common ground on many rules and many standards. But also making a use of that and taking the opportunities to make something useful out of this out of this common ground. So I think that more than beyond the coordination of positions, there's also how do we actually put in place this cooperation? How do we find out if we have common positions? In what instances, and how to bring it to real life, this cooperation, because there's also the issue of resources, and normally countries don't have many resources to travel or to participate in many forums. There's not enough people in agencies, so I think there's a challenge there related to cooperation, which in turn might impact the possibility of having common positions in broader fora. So thank you.
Thank you, Natalia. Nano?
Building upon what Natalia and Karina have been saying, indeed, I think that there are two challenges. First is to increase the number of countries in Latin America and the Caribbean that participate in these plurilateral negotiations. As I mentioned before, in the case of the joint initiative for e-commerce, only 12 countries in the region are participating, and the one on domestic services regulation, which is also very important for digital services trade, only 9 countries. So the first challenge, I think, is to increase the number of countries that participate in these initiatives. And then second, how to bring about this collaboration. And I think the most promising avenue would be to go for the sub-regional integration schemes. As mentioned, both Mercosur, Pacific Alliance, and to some extent also the Andean Community do have a digital agenda with a lot of elements in common, and I think those are an excellent stepping stone for also to assess common and bring about common positions of these countries, both to step up the level of ambition and convergence of the sub-regional integration schemes, but also to foster a certain convergence of these countries. And actually the 9 and 12 countries I mentioned are particularly members of the Indian community, of the Pacific Alliance and the and Mercosur. So those are definitely the two regional blocs that are most active in the international negotiations. So I think that is that would be an excellent mechanism to foster greater cooperation in the future. And then again, I think regional organizations like the CAF, Development Bank of Latin America, IDP, and also ECLAC can play a role there to assist the countries in this process, and also help with resources to facilitate this process.
Thank you, Nano. I would like to make a last question. It's linked to the question that some of the participants make regarding if there is a space in the region to coordinate a kind of DEPA agreement. For those who doesn't know, DEPA is a digital economy partnership agreement that was signed by Chile, New Zealand, and Singapore in order to see some opportunities and foster a digital economy. What type of maybe initiatives or projects could be fostered in the region within already established programs in sub-regional digital trade agreements, or maybe bilateral agreements regarding digital economy? What type of initiatives, projects could be fostered in order to promote our digital economy and obviously digital trade? I don't know if anyone would like to answer. No,
Sorry,
no one.
I don't know if I am repeating a little bit what I have already said, but from my point of view, the idea or the ideal, it would be to try to make those blocks work together in order to make a commitment, binding commitment on digital trade. We do not have between the countries in the Mercosur and the countries in the Pacific Alliance, there are not binding commitments on electronic commerce, the basic ones, the free flow of information, location of computing facilities, those I am talking about. So it would be good to have those commitments. But also, I think that if we go to that stage, if we become prepared to be at that stage, then we also have the opportunity probably to include commitments, binding commitments on more detailed issues related to data protection or consumer protection that in other FTAs have not necessarily been discussed in detail. The commitments are very general on those issues, and probably are the issues that currently the users, the consumers, and also the providers are noticing that is necessarily to discuss. So it would be interesting to analyze that possibility. It would be ideal, that idea, but it is always possible. It depends on political will also. But currently also we have, on the other hand, already we have groups, working groups on each one of the blocks on digital issues that could work together. There hasn't been proposed a jointly meeting, for example, for those groups, but probably it is something that could happen in a very short time.
Excellent. Thank you, Karina, for those thoughts. Sadly, we have run out of time. So from my side, thank you again for all participants for joining the webinar. Thank you especially to our panelists for giving us their time to share their experiences on these very interesting topics. I will give the floor to Nicolas for the closing. And for my side, once again, thank you for Trade Policy Exchange for the invitation for the moderation of the panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alejandro, and a special thanks from my side and from the Trade Policy Exchange to all the panelists today. We had a very enlightening and very frank exchange of ideas that I'm sure will be very useful in the discussions that we're having on digital trade in Latin America, but also the Caribbean. I think that's also part of the challenges that we have. And yes, it would be lovely to have negotiations on this, but I agree with what the panelists said today. We have some challenges to overcome. But again, thank you all very much, all to those that participated today, and particularly to our panelists today, and to Alejandro for his great moderation. Thank you very much, and please visit tradepolicyexchange.org for more information on upcoming events. Thank you very much. Goodbye.